Hey guys, this will be video 2 for the how to design build a Les Paul custom replacement neck. And I'm primarily just going to provide all of the dimensions for this particular neck for whomever might be interested in it. And then I'll go into some detail about the construction of it, but probably not in too much detail in this video because it takes so long for them to upload once they go over 15 or 20 minutes. So on that note, let's just dive right in. What are the specs? If you're getting ready to buy this neck, the things you're going to want to know are the dimension from the top of the headstock, because this is very close to being finished, extremely close. If you were going to clear coat it, it's going to need just a little bit more sanding. But if you're going to paint it, it's ready to go. All right, so we're looking at about 7 3/16 of an inch from the end of the neck, obviously, to where it starts pitching. Okay, we know that's 17 degrees. It's a 17-degree pitch headstock. 7 3/16. And what would the metric be? It's 83. Okay, so it's 83 inches. And across from here to here, I already know this dimension is 3.5. And let me let me look at my note here, see if I can remember that. Yeah, this is 3.5 across the top. It's 3 3/16 right there. It's 5/8 inch thick here. It's 1/2 inch thick right there, the taper. And I don't know the. I know this is 133. I'm pretty sure this is 133. 133. Be careful. I'm measuring it. I'm going to try to measure it as straight. In other words, if I measure it on an angle, it might distort it. So measuring it as straight as possible from that point right there to that is 132.5, 133, give or take, millimeter. Should be 5 3/16. Okay. All right. Next thing you would want to know is how thick the neck is. The lower. I call this the lower. How thick is the lower? This little 0 represents the 1st fret location. That little 0 and mark represents the 11th fret location. So this will be the taper of the lower. This is 17 millimeter. That's a 7/8 inch neck thickness if you go with a Stewart McDonald fretboard. Okay, at the 11th fret, it's 20 millimeter. And it's 26 millimeter with the Stewart McDonald fretboard. Let me give you the imperial. Let me put that on 26. 26 millimeter is 1 1/32 of an inch thick at the 11th fret. 7/8 inch thick at the 1st fret. What is that? It's basically a Les Paul. This guitar right here was a 1980. It's actually pre-Tim Shaw era. I had made a mistake in the last video and I called it the Tim Shaw era. I don't think Tim Shaw came on board until the late 70s, and this guitar was in 1980, so it was right when they were introducing the Heritage Series era. But this would be considered, a Norland era guitar. And when I mentioned what are those dimensions, this is exactly what that guitar was. 1 1/32 inch at the 11th fret, 7/8 inch thick at the 1st fret. Okay, and how does it feel? Feels like a Gibson, man. Feels like a Les Paul. and it feels incredible. It also reminds me of the jazz guitars I used to build, and I may have mentioned that in the last video. I won't bring it up again, but if you need some more information about my credentials, I've been building guitars a long time, necks as well, and we'll get into that in a little while. So let me clean off the neck a little bit. I mean the table, so I don't get too congested here, because I want to keep this video as positively short as possible, so it won't take so long to upload. Uh, so talked about the headstock enough. Double adjustable truss rod, all that was covered in the last video. I went into extreme detail about how I epoxy this fillet in, lower the complete truss rod down about a 16th of an inch. You have to be careful when you do that. If you lower it a 16th of an inch here, well, then that's a 16th of an inch that you cannot take out of the back here. Okay, this double adjustable truss rod was designed to be an extremely low profile, designed so that it could be flushed out with the top of the lower, and it would allow someone to build, like a shredder type neck, extremely thin neck. We're talking, 3/4 of an inch total thickness with the fretboard and all that jazz. You're not going to be able to achieve that with this neck. But I don't know anybody that would be replacing this guitar neck and expecting to put a shredder on it. Can you achieve a little bit thinner 60s profile? Yeah, you can take off about another millimeter here and you should be fine. You can take off about another, and I'm bad about talking in millimeter and then converting over to imperial, but you can take off about a millimeter here in thickness, and you could take off about probably 2 millimeter up here. And so you could get fairly thin if you wanted to, but again, I prefer to leave it with the traditional thickness to start with, and you buy it, it's your project, you do whatever you want. But I am going to provide you in just a moment tolerances. Well, I kind of already have. Basically, I just did. You can't go under whatever I just said, 22 millimeter. You can't go under 21 millimeter. Okay, I'd say that's the threshold, but you still have a substantial amount of wood in the back for structural integrity. Now, I'm going to digress here a little bit and talk about how, with my neck, you're okay doing that because the way I build my necks, they are not under any tension. Like right now, in order to achieve that perfectly flat surface, as I covered in the last video, get the truss rod wrench here, little Allen wrench. See, I'm not under any tension. So the way I build my lowers, as long as you do an exceptional job putting your fretboard on, and you cut your fret slots the perfect fret slot width, when you put and you marry up the tang properly and all that jazz, then after you install all your frets and you've glued your fretboard down properly, you should have a guitar that once you put the strings on it, you only have to turn that truss rod back about an eighth of a turn. So what does that mean? It means that you're not putting this neck upper area under an enormous amount of stress. If you did a really poor job on your frets and they were way too tight or way too loose, either way, you're having to do an extreme amount of offset here at the truss rod, and that's really poor work. And it also could contribute to an easier breakage if you drop the guitar. Because my theory is if you've got this baby under an enormous amount of tension and the rod's pulling in a certain direction, and then it falls and you have a catastrophic blow, well, that truss rod under extreme tension is going to help break the headstock. It's just kind of common sense. So think through those things. Think through those things and realize that the way I built this lower is kind of at the optimum level of performance once it's all put together. So, all right. So, what would be the next dimensions you would want to know? I would want to know the width of this nut location, which I'll go straight to the finish line as I say too much and tell you it is enormous. It's actually over 1 3/4, but by about a 64th of an inch. It's basically 45 millimeter, I believe. Yeah, it's exactly 45 millimeter, and that needs to be for my favorite guitar. That needs to be 43 millimeter. Will I cut that taper for you? Yeah, I'll put all this stuff in the ad. What I'm willing to do for free or what I'm willing to do for no charge. But nonetheless, me personally, I wanted to leave that 1 3/4 just in the event there's someone out there that's always wanted a 1 3/4 inch Les Paul custom neck, but they can't hardly get them because I don't know if you know who even offers that. So, but one thing that is critical, this dimension right here, this is a 2 3/16 of an inch or 55 and a half. I believe it's 55. Let's use this more accurate. I do know that it's 2 3/16 of an inch at the 16th fret, and it's 56. Yeah, I'm looking at exactly 56 millimeter at the 16th fret. What is that? That's basically this right here, a StewMac 1950s Les Paul. This is a 59 per Dan Erlewines burst, as I've already mentioned numerous times in the past videos. So that doesn't need to change. And when I say I'm perfectly on center, everything about my offset, here, my offset there, I've already covered this in extensive detail. This is perfectly square all the way around. It's just so true. It's just really perfect. I call that S4S. It's perfectly S4S. And not only that, if you were to measure over from the edge to the center of that Bolivian rosewood, it's identical from this side as it is from this side. So what that tells you is that when you're working with this neck, you're able to install this neck by just monitoring the center line of everything and put it in your body accordingly. And I have this offset such that as long as you maintain that 2 3/16 of an inch, you got plenty of neck right there to fit in your traditional 50s Les Paul. This Norland era Les Paul, I'm gonna push this all the way over to the left side and show you the difference. It's I don't know if you can see it, but it's about 3/64 of an inch. It's pretty substantial. So if you had this fretboard, and let me just say this. I can't guarantee you that my neck is going to fit your fretboard because I don't have your fretboard in front of me. So just be prepared to realize that, wow, I may have to come in here and, you know, take some of this taper down on this side a little bit. But then once it meets the cutaway on the body of the guitar, if it's a right-handed guitar, once it meets that cutaway, then I've got to know what I'm doing when I change the taper over here and take this from 2 3/16 of an inch down to whatever this is, 3/64 of an inch less. Okay, splitting hairs here. Any luthier that is able to install a neck, they already know this stuff. If you're doing this yourself, just be prepared to possibly install the neck, well, based on wherever the tenon, the mortise is cut in the body. But you may have to, make some changes in order to get it to fit in your neck. Or if you're building a brand new, if you're building a custom guitar, this baby's perfectly true and centered and S4S all the way around. So what does that equate to? It'll make your build so much easier because you're not fighting anything that's ill-designed or ill-manufactured. I did do a little bit of cleanup on some of the sanding, and I did some real nice truing of this dimension here, that taper, from the past video, and also did some round over. But so I've already covered the fact that it is 1 3/4 of an inch right now, and it really needs to have about a 1/16 of an inch off of it to be a traditional guitar. But this needs to remain close to 2 3/16 of an inch. So I say all that to say this: once you actually come in here and glue your new fretboard down, you should just be doing minimal, very minimal blending. you will not be having to do a lot of horrific sanding and shaping to get that to blend together if you have a good fretboard and you did a really good job getting it installed. Okay. And also everything about is the centering down here also transfers up here. If you were to measure in the center of that route, it's identical on either side. In other words, it's 7/8 of an inch. 7/8 of an inch from the edge here to the center there. 7/8 of an inch from the edge here to the center there. Okay. Let me pause, get a drink of water. Okay, I may have just covered this, but because I took a break and I went upstairs and I got a drink, so I may have already covered this. But if I didn't, it's 1 1/4 inch width there, slightly over that, slightly over 1 1/4. Obviously, perfectly true there. 1 9/16 of an inch. It's actually under because I did sand a little bit of that off. So it is over 1 1/2 of an inch right there. And one thing I didn't mention a little while ago when I was giving you these dimensions about, this is the Stuart McDonald profile. I don't know if I mentioned it, but it does feel really incredible, and it feels like an authentic guitar. That I would recommend staying with that dimension right there. But if you want to make this a really, really fat and chunky feeling neck, since it is a Les Paul custom, it will be getting, replacement, it will be getting a binding. So sometimes I'll come up under the fretboard before I put the binding on, and I will either epoxy or tight bond glue some veneer down, and you'd be surprised that veneer. Just make certain that it's a phenomenal glue. You don't want any air pockets or any bubbles in there because you want a very flat surface, but that veneer is sufficient to thicken things up. And then whatever you do under this fretboard, then your binding it will be concealed behind the binding. If you were to install this on this neck like this, and it was possibly ended up being it might be maple to maple and it might look really nice. You might think it's great, but then once you put this down and put your binding on it and you did all the sanding, you'd see that pinstripe. Now, you might like that because you might do some walnut veneer or some cocobola or some exotic beautiful dark wood. I've done that before and it's really stunning, especially on jazz guitars. So sky's the limit, but you could fatten it up a little bit by putting some mass up under the fretboard. The next thing that is really important as far as this neck that I'm holding in my hand, there's a substantial amount of dimension going on here from the depth perspective. Uh, this is the Stuart McDonald 1959 neck that is meant to go in a 2-inch body, which is an enormous body. So I just want you to see how much material can come off of this hill in order to achieve the authentic 50s dimension there. And I don't know what that dimension is. I think it's about 1 5/8 of an inch. And if I'm losing you, I'm talking about this height from this distance here to there. I believe it's 1 5/8 of an inch. But then once the fretboard goes down, obviously it gets thicker. So to recap that, I just want you to see how much material, and even look at the tenon. See, I could even take, let me just look at it and I'll give you the dimension. I could put this on my table saw and take off 1/8 of an inch in the height. I think it's 1 9/16 right now, so we drop that down to 1 7/16 inch. And if you prefer the 50s Les Paul, I could put this probably on the table saw, and I could take off the bottom of that heel cap. And I say all that to say this, that probably would be a good idea. It would be necessary if you're doing clear coat, because I forgot, when I was building this neck, I never ever considered using this neck as a stain grade neck. So when I was doing my when I was cutting that out with when I was cutting these little areas out right here on the table saw blade went just enough to, really, I almost said the wrong thing, but just enough to get under my skin. Okay. And that's an idiot move. That's an amateurish move, even for a paint grade neck. What a shame. But it doesn't really matter if it's going into traditional Les Paul because the bulk of that bottom would be getting cut off anyway. And it's right at the threshold that it would disappear for a stain grade. Now, if you're putting this on like a jazzed up, nice jazz guitar, we always put heel caps on the bottom, so anything that is going on under in other words, if you built your own custom guitar and it had a really thick body, well, let me tell you just how thick of a body you can go with. If you want it to flush, your body can be one and a little over 1 3/4 of an inch if you want it to truly flush out with the bottom of the body. I don't think that looks good on a Les Paul type guitar at all. And even the Gretsch, they don't do that at all. Everything about those guitars, they step up considerably. I know you probably know that, but that's kind of what you're. That's considerable. I mean, that's probably 1/4 of an inch. But on this particular guitar, I probably will be coming in with a very thin cap that I usually have an engraving company do my logo because it's not a Gibson, it's a custom built guitar. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And let me just measure this. Yeah, this is it's under 1 5/8 of an inch, and this body is 2 inches. So if you had a 2 inch, and this is based on the Stuart McDonald 1950s Les Paul footprint, the big body, it is 2 inches. And based on that dimension there, that lets you know that you could take a considerable amount of material off this one and still achieve that right there. I don't believe I'll be able to show it, but that should make perfect sense. Okay, let me pause and get organized. Okay, I don't think I mentioned this. I did mention about how you could build up your Stuart McDonald fretboard. That's kind of a cowboy's way of doing it, although it works exceptionally well. There's nothing wrong with that. And where you could do that, and I'm going to digress because this is so critically important to know, if you're restoring an old vintage guitar that somebody just really butchered the fretboard and just really made a mess of it, either when they took the frets out, they tore it up really bad, or either someone had overly machined it by hand and just really effed it up, you could remove that entire fretboard and come in on the back and build it up whatever thickness you need. And if you have like a Brazilian rosewood, then you might come in with an Indian rosewood, or just really high quality wood, build that fretboard up, and then do all your binding, and then reshape your top. That's a great way of restoring a vintage guitar and maintaining the original fretboard. But if you're building new, you could do like me, like I have in that little 58 replica over there. This is my personal guitar. This is Gabon Ebony, and it is enormous. It's about a little more than a 64th of an inch over. Now it's probably closer to a 32nd of an inch over 1/4. So it's really massive. It's more like a cello. the thing is enormous. And I say all that to say this: if you were trying to achieve a really fat, chunky profile on this particular neck, you could, make your own fretboard and make it as thick as you want. But if you do that, be careful because your binding will get enormously high out here and it'll look really goofy. And also your the nut will be unbelievably tall out here to compensate for an unbelievably tall fretboard. That ought to make perfect sense. Okay, so what would be the next thing you would need to know? The reason I kept this up here on the table was to let you know this is a true tracing of the 59 Dan Erlewine the Stuart McDonald Dan Erlewine 59 tracing that shows you exactly where the neck pickup is. It lets you know how long the tenon is. In other words, this could be a long tenon and get cut off, but keep in mind this tenon is 1 1/4, and the 50s Les Paul is a 1 1/2 inch tenon. This was designed to be a replacement very easily for the Norland era Les Paul. But in the event, as I mentioned in the last video, if you wanted to use this in a authentic design and an authentic body, I'll need to either epoxy those sides back on or provide you with some 100 mahogany and stuff like that. I'll work with you on that. But I just wanted you to see that you got this tenon is probably, even at this point, this tenon is about 1/4 of an inch too long, if not 3/8 of an inch longer than even necessary. All right, let me check the time. 26 minutes. It's amazing how it takes so long to do these videos. And sometimes I don't think it's that I'm getting too long-winded. I think it's just there's an enormous amount of information. The way I machine my necks is I've never seen anybody do it, but I'm sure that's probably how most people do it. I machine them from the side like this, and in other words, overhead, and I do all this freehand. That is a 1 inch radius. Is that right? Yes. 1 inch radius, 2 inch diameter profile. What is that? Positively identical to that right there. Okay. So Norland era. But I do know that on some of my fat 50s profiles, I'll cut with a 7/8 inch round radius. And I got to tell you, they're too fat. They got way too much shoulder on them. And I have played a vintage, I don't know what year it was. It was probably a 58 or 59. And it did not have a fat shoulder. So the 1 inch is my initial route. I do all my initial machine work, and then everything else is done by hand, blending it in. Okay. And this is very, very close to finish. But as I mentioned, you could take a little bit thinner if you want. But if you do, you're on your own, and you'll need to know what you're doing in order to keep all that level and not get any hills in it. Okay, so 1 inch profile, initial route. Let me check the time. We'll talk about binding if we have time. I don't really want to talk about binding in detail, but I'm going to talk about it just enough so that you'll be aware of what it is you're about to get yourself into if you've never done this before. I'm not making fun of anybody. I just know that binding will just really it'll either humble you or it'll send you off the deep end. All right. So basically, when you're binding with, as I mentioned in the last video, if you go with a 3mm overlay, you're going to have to take off you're going to have to remove 3mm off the back, and that will need to be epoxy down. It's called a Vulcan fiber. I was wrong in the last video. It's a Vulcan fiber, but nonetheless, it's extremely strong. But that Vulcan fiber, when it comes up here, it's going to have to be cut on a 17-degree angle in order to meet your, the nut. So if you do this, or if you're planning on building your own overlay, just know that you can't route down into this, because if you did route down into this, focus on the bottom edge of this piece of binding. Now this is over this is a little bit wider than what it would actually be, but it would go all the way back to the bottom edge of the binding would go all the way back to about right there. In other words, it would be going up under the fretboard. And that's what I meant by, you got your fretboard and the nut location up here. I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but I have to be a little bit elementary because some people have never, ever thought on this level, which is perfectly fine. But this will help you understand it. In other words, you want your binding to come up here, not back here. Okay? and we're concerned about that bottom edge. If you do that right there, you made a huge mistake. It's going to be really ugly. Okay. All right, let me look at my notes here, and I might just read off some stuff, but I think I covered pretty much everything that needed to be covered. Covered all the dimensions, all the specs. I think the only thing I didn't cover, I probably did in one of the videos. Currently, this is a 4-degree pitch. 4 degree. It's not 4.5. It's not 3.5, and it's not 3 3/4. It is exactly 4 degree. Every archtop replica that I've built, 4 degree is absolutely perfect for the dimensions. Some of them are a little bit more. Some of them are a little bit less. But you have to know what you're doing when you're building your arch top. So it's 4 degrees. Okay, and the truss rod that is in this guitar is 16 3/4 of an inch long. That's the correct length truss rod for that guitar. So I'm probably just going to end the video right there. Otherwise, it'll end up being a 35-minute video, and I'll get in trouble as far as trying to get it uploaded. But when I mentioned that whole 4 degree pitch, this will give you an idea what one actually looks like when it goes in a body. If the body did not have, okay, just imagine that's the 2 inch tall. I don't know what that dimension is, but it probably is close to 2 inches. If you did not have the arch top on the lower of the body, that's the pitch. Okay, so that'll give you an idea. If you're experimenting and building your own guitar and it's an arch top, and I'll try to keep this simple, but it would be real easy to start with a lower that's obviously flat, install it at this point, at whatever point you want it, and then you could install your top. And then the reason I'm going in this direction is you could take advantage of the fact of this pitch right here, and as long as you never lost that pitch, you could carve everything based on that right there, so that once you did install your fretboard, see what this is turning into? Okay, it's kind of holding your hand if you've never built an archtop guitar. And I'm revealing to you things that I never ever got to see when I was considering building guitars. And these types of images are just not available online. But just envision an archtop being slid up under there, and then that getting notched out to receive your pickup. Okay, ton of great information there. I hope it was helpful. But nonetheless, sky's the limit. This is a great deal for somebody, as I've mentioned, and I wish I could think of some use for it, but I just really can't, because I'm so busy with the mahogany stuff. And I'll go straight to the finish line, as I continue to say, but I think the main reason why I don't really want to work with it is because I'm so spoiled from working with some of the most beautiful maple you've ever seen. You know, all the heavily figured bird's eye and stuff like that. And this is a beautiful little neck, but it's just see that discoloration right there. To me, that's a reject for a high-end stained grade jazz guitar. But this might be a left-hand player guitar. Okay, so you might be perfectly okay with that discoloration being on the bottom, because it's kind of tucked away, and you don't see it. But the Bolivian rosewood is positively stunning, and I had talked about that in the last video, where this guy from Brazil that watches my channel chimed in and said, I don't know why they call it Pavijo or Bolivian rosewood, because it's actually harvested, where he said he's from. Now, I don't know the guy. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that that is an endangered wood if that were Brazilian rosewood. It's probably just an older growth Bolivian, because when I bought it from my vendor, I'll go straight to the finish line. This is critically important. When I bought it from my vendor, I bought it as a Palo Ferro, is what we call it in the States, or a Bolivian rosewood. So, in other words, I didn't buy some Bolivian rosewood 35 years ago, and then it's been sitting. I didn't buy any Brazilian rosewood 35 years ago, and it's been sitting in my stock. I've had this wood about maybe 8 years, maybe 10 years tops, and it was Pa Ferro when I bought it. So pretty little guitar neck, but if you ask my opinion, it needs to be shot with black nitro cellulose lacquer and installed on a Gibson Les Paul, either a replica or a replacement. So appreciate you guys checking in. I'll end the video right there, and hopefully the listing will go live within a couple of hours, and we'll see what it sells for. Thanks, guys. See you in the next video.